And so if you are in the duality, if you're in duality and you really believe people are separate because of the human nature or the matrix programming, which is of the lower nature, which is I'll just get what I can for myself, which is selfish. I mean, there's so much we could talk about. We could talk about the Pistis Sophia and how that models for us the lower realms and the archons pulling you into these lower realms, and how Sophia wisdom gets stuck in these lower realms. But this idea that you're doing it, that you're grabbing things for yourself, because we're all programmed to think I need to have some advantage to others. We're in competition with all these other 7 billion beings. And once you understand non-duality, once you understand there's only one of us here,
yes,
the same being, then the need for the law sort of collapses. You see that it's a temporary thing.
Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers. James and Justin back again, and today we have another special guest with us. We have Jill Brennan from her YouTube channel, Non-Dual Christian. Now, that's an interesting title because depending on where you're coming from in terms of, maybe your belief systems, that might seem like a contradiction. It might not make any sense to you. But I'm sure she's going to be able to help us answer some of the questions revolving around that.
Yeah, she's got some eclectic ideas. She does stuff like ASMR, like mystical ASMR.
Yeah.
Very interesting person. I'm looking forward to hearing her interesting ideas.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we won't keep you waiting. Let's get into it. Jill, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. Non-dual Christian. That's a fascinating term. A lot of people, I'm sure, might be unfamiliar or see it maybe even as a contradiction. Maybe we could just dive right into the deep waters and talk about what does it mean to be a non-dual Christian?
Some people would say there's no such thing, and I've certainly had that pushback in the comments section. I think this is an evolution for me. I think that my background is Christian. My upbringing was within the Salvation Army, and it really emphasized a personal relationship. So from being in Sunday school as a young child, it was all about knowing Jesus and having a personal relationship with him. It's very internalized. So I was quite familiar with this idea of the Christ within and this inner dialogue. And so it wasn't an emphasis on external kind of rituals and so on. And so that was really how I started my life, really having that one-to-one and knowing that presence. And then I sort of moved away from the church. I mean, there's a lot to. I was really involved at one point. I was a minister in the Salvation Army. I was involved fully. But you know what? Things changed when I say things changed. For me, a turning point was personal struggle and suffering. So when my dad became ill and had a stroke that pretty much disabled him and took his speech, and he never recovered from that. And then about a year later, this was when I was only about 15, 16, and then about a year later, I was diagnosed with an eye disease, a condition, and I was really scared because I just didn't know what that would mean. And it's been fine, but at the time it was scary. So these things set you off on asking that question, why is this happening? This existential crisis. And I think that I just started to lose faith in this idea of an interventionist God. So it was moving away from the idea of prayer and why do some prayers are answered and others aren't. I think people will be really familiar with that.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I think I became over the years a lot more interested in the more Christian mystics. But then only recently, I'd say in the last 5 years or so, I came across Advaita Vedanta through Rupert Spira. And on listening to Rupert Spira, something just resonated. And it made so much sense. And I can talk about a number of times. We can talk about this of when I had an experience of it. And I think really it's about starting from experience. And that's always what he says. It's about just coming home to who is here. Start with what you know. And the only thing we know is what is our experience. So it's that I am awareness presence. And, there have been times in my life when that's the only thing that I've been able to really rely on. And so I just couldn't get enough of his teaching, was soaking it all up. I love the fact that I think he started off as an Anglican, and then went on this journey where he went to an ashram, and for 20, 30 years or whatever, he was over having teachers in the East, in India, and then has come back and been bringing it to the West, teaching it. But more recently, he's kind of got interested again in the Christian mystics, and he's reconnected with Christianity, which even starting to use the word God, which he would not do for a long time. And so that really was helpful, because it confirmed what I was on, because it's a lonely path. I mean, I don't even think it is a thing. It's just really my channel is just exploring the journey and seeing what happens and sharing that with people.
There's so much potential with you being that way, because in spirituality, like, you're not the first like Christian we've tried to get a dialogue with, right? Like, but the idea of shaking up overly restrictive and suppressive ideological aspects, like, bridging a gap, I think is you have a lot of potential to do that. And I didn't know that about Rupert Spira, that he's returned to this sort of I call it Christianese, when people start referencing the Bible. You know what I mean?
He's got he's got a book out, and I've just ordered it, and it's sort of all the things. It's kind of some prayers, but it's still from his most recent, from about 2020 onwards, some of his conferences he's done where he's speaking with people. So it's beautifully written. What I love about it is the simplicity of it.
He's brilliant. His similar thing. I remember he came on my radar relatively recently, probably within the last year or so. And one clip in particular, I think he's answering like a little girl, and she's like, or something like that. And he's essentially giving her a little bit of a guideline to how to get connected to the present. And it was profound. I like did it along with the instruction, and I was like, oh my God, I had like a little like epiphany moment. Yeah. And I love that stuff. I love all the approaches. And as you were talking, this is the last little thing I'll put on it, because I'm a chattermouth. But I'll say I love the idea of inverted versions of things, like you've got to be familiar with the concept of enlightenment at this point. Yeah. But the idea of, to me, there's an aspect of this is like, it's only ever a clearing of the glass. It's like, try to, instead of thinking of like more practices, more rigidity, try to see it as you just get the stuff out of the way, and eventually you'll recognize what you're talking about from within, whether it's associated with Christ or the Holy Spirit or consciousness or being. It's just hidden. You know what I mean? And I actually think people get glimpses of it. Like every now and then, it's like every now and then you'll hear mystical phrases like, everybody's enlightened already. It's like, you've seen it, but you take it for granted because it gets quickly refilled with a bunch of world stuff. Sorry, I know that was long. Just excited by some of the things he said.
Well, it's interesting that that channel name, Non-Dual Christian, is quite recent. It was more, before that, it was Let's Reconnect, because the reason I came on YouTube was to try to make sense of reconnective healing. So I did mention something about these two illnesses, and it was what set me off on a path of wanting to know more about healing and thinking, Jesus was a healer. You can't miss that. You're going through the pages. It's on every page almost. And it wasn't something necessarily in the Salvation Army that we did healing, but it was just the fact that I thought, I'll just pray and these things, because he's a good person, my dad, and why did bad things happen to good people? So it's this theodicy question, and then obviously my own need and my own fear. So I was hungry for that, finding out more, and that's what led me then to go to university. I went and did a theology degree in religious studies to go deeper and understand a little bit more. So even though I had a kind of personal experience of faith, it was wanting to know about more than just my home tradition, and I love the fact that it was okay to do that. I know that sometimes Christians get scared and they say you shouldn't be going outside of they have the guardrails up, and for me it was kind of, I know this. I know the truth of this. This is my truth. So I'm not scared. There's nothing to fear. I'm just curious and interested to understand all of it.
Greater is he that is in me than that which is in the world. What is there to fear if that's true?
Yeah. And so in terms of the healing, I'll to come more up to date of probably about 10 years ago, perhaps, I was wanting to get involved in healing. And I did think, well, maybe I'll go to the church, because near where I lived at the time, there was a Bethel church. You'll know of Bethel Church, and they had these healing rooms, and it was really close, like literally down the road. So I went and booked a session. First time, it was lovely. It was really lovely. Came out feeling all zen and peaceful. And then a few months later, I went to a second, and it was completely different the second time. And I mean, really, in the point of almost traumatizing me when I left, because it was a lot of invasive questions. It was really to do with the person leading it. Even the people around were kind of like, I think that's enough, Brenda, because she was sort of pushing my eyes, and her fingers, and kind of in the name of
hypnosis techniques.
Oh, well, like because if it was to try and get rid of a sort of demon that might be causing this, and it just wasn't good. And my husband picked me up afterwards and was like, "Get me out, get me out of here. I don't want to go back to that."
I think it's hypnosis. I actually think it's anyway. Sorry, go on.
Whatever. I'm not. I'd had enough experience from growing up, knowing that when to sense the Holy Spirit, and I also trusted this presence in the body, and that's something that I think it would be lovely if we could talk about, because this, for me, I think is the main thing that might be interesting to the people that are listening and to yourselves. And so I had the first experience of if you want to say a visceral experience in the body when I was very young. I was about 6 or something, and I know that when I was sitting in the meeting, and my dad was the choir leader, and they were singing this song, and it was called "Remember Me," and it was just a plea to sort of remember me, remember your dying ones, and then remember me. But as a little girl, I thought it was about Jesus, because I'd heard the story of him in the Last Supper, saying, "Do this in remembrance of me," and it was a soft song, and I just felt that I got emotional as a young child, and I didn't understand why it made me cry, but it was this heartfelt response to it. And about another incident would be when I was about 12 or 13, and I remember coming home from school, and it was about an hour before my parents got home, because it was a latchkey kid, and we went in. We must have been talking with my friend at school earlier about ghosts and stuff like that, and we got this Ouija board, or we didn't. We made this Ouija board. We got this glass, and we must have put some little letters on pieces of paper, and we were on the kitchen floor, and we were doing this. And whether or not it was moving, I don't know. But at one bit, I just felt really cold, and I felt this is wrong. And I said, I've got to go. I didn't feel well. And I sort of sent her out, went into the bathroom, was physically sick. And I hadn't been ill at all that day. And it was a way of saying, this isn't right, this isn't good. And I was saying the prayers and all the things I knew to do, but it just went. It never mentioned it to my parents. They would have never had any idea we'd done it. But those incidents sort of stick out, because that was a way of trusting and knowing whatever this is, this connection to Jesus, it's here and it's within, and it'll always be there, and it'll guide, and it'll let me know. And I think that trusting that meant that nothing's off limits. And, not many Christians will talk this way, because they get very much that this is the remit, this is the framework, and we stay within that framework. And so I started off thinking, oh, well, okay, maybe Christian healing. But no, not after my experience of Christian healing, not after seeing them, online, and all of this. It's very theatrical, it's very dramatic, and it's very egocentric, and it's just, kind of like game show hosts, isn't it? Just like you say, it's in that kind of manipulation of some sort.
It can be sometimes, but there's good reason for that too. Even I think, like reasons.
Yeah.
There's a few things that you mentioned there that I wanted to talk about. The healing thing. Yeah. I'll say this quickly. I love the idea of Christians really starting to listen to Jesus's words with less rationality and more let it happen to you, because what you said there about it opens up all these things. It's non-restrictive. Like, consider some of the things Christ said, like, you'll do greater things than me, and or other things found in the Bible, like they'll be able to take up snakes and do this. It's like, don't go take up snakes. Don't go walk on a stormy sea. But open your heart to the truth of what's being said here. If you move out of this what is it called when something's overly systematized or overly, it doesn't matter.
Institute.
Get out of your ideology.
Yeah.
But the healing thing, when you talked about exploring healing, that's intriguing me too, because I genuinely love the idea of being able to heal. Yes. But if you think about Christ, most of the people he healed were people seeking his healing. Yeah. And I think he even said at one point, by your faith you are healed. Yeah. And that does touch a little bit on the realm of hypnosis. Not hypnosis as a dirty word, but like, you don't realize the power of your mind. Like, start with yourself and be like, okay, like I'm going to literally do a visualization here. I'm going to imagine the Holy Spirit sending healing vibes to this ailment I have here. And I'm imagining my genetics, coping with this. And I don't have the terminology. I'm just going to sound more ignorant the more I talk. But using your own mind to direct your faith healing towards yourself. If you start to radiate this, and this is my answer, this is how I'll tie it up. My answer to why you might go into a place where people are doing this to you, or they're waving their hand over a crowd and everybody's falling over. They've been primed, and by their faith, they might even be being healed. Like, if I can get you to believe that I've got the power to heal you, then you might just be healed. It's taking the spiritualness out of it, which is not necessary. It can still be spiritual. Like, psychology can still be spiritual. You don't need, it's just words, it's still magical if you think about it. And I'll leave it at that. I hope that was corroborated what you were saying.
And when you were saying faith, I'm thinking the word attention, which we can come back to, about what you give attention to, which is where the wave collapses, and we're in this sort of field of non-duality. But to bring you up to, it's sort of just bringing up about, that wasn't going to be the right healing for me. I didn't want that. So somebody mentioned something about Reiki, and I thought, oh, okay, I'll look into that. So I looked into what Reiki was, and when I saw that it was like something from Japanese, and you had this master, and you would choose a master, and they would, I think, for 3 times or 3 different, I forget what they call attunements, maybe, and they put their hands on your hair, and you use these symbols and so on, and it was all alien to me in the sense that it wasn't my culture, and it wasn't. And I remember saying in my heart to Jesus, I don't want to go outside of what I already know. I have chosen and made my decision to follow you. You're the master of choice. You are my master of choice. Why would I have to look outside to find another master? And I felt that was just the same as sort of giving my power away to someone I wouldn't know, whereas I felt comfortable with Jesus. I could trust that. And so I said, show me then, just show me. And it wasn't long after that I found a book, and it was called The Reconnection, Heal Others, Heal Yourself, just through a Google search. And I liked the fact that it was about heal yourself. It wasn't via some other agency. Okay? So, and it even said that people had found this when they were even reading the book and activation started. And I thought, this is interesting. So he was a chiropractor as well. There wasn't a belief system attached to it that might conflict with my own, where I felt I was. And, it was, he was a chiropractor. So it was just long story. I won't go into the story, and people can look him up if they want to. But the point is, even on reading the book, I started to feel energy in my hands. And up to this point, I hadn't really felt anything. So there was a kind of activation that came through that book. And if you were to trace that back, you would see that how he came into contact with this and didn't understand what it was. It's via Kabbalah, which would be the mystical Judaism.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's sort of in a similar ballpark, I suppose, to Jesus. But the point was, I'd made this prayer to Jesus and asked, and then this came, and I was trying it on my husband and on my son, and I mean, they were starting to just really have these reactions in their body, which is just bizarre. It's like, what is this? And then I saw that Eric Pearl was coming to England. He was coming to London. So I booked tickets. So this is the way to test it. I'll go for this 3 or 4 days, whatever it was. And I will know by the end of it, is this the green light? Does this feel right? And I have to say, at first I wasn't quite sure, because a lot of production, and I thought, I don't know, but I was feeling it straight away. Some people weren't getting it straight away, but by the Sunday, I can remember there was a point where we were doing the table work, and he was talking us through it, and he said something about, some of you are coming into your calling, and people were crying, and there was just this sense of atmosphere and presence that I recognized as what I'd known before of the Holy Spirit. So
Mm.
for me, that's not a problem. I know for some Christians there would be, oh no, because it's not the church or they need those labels. That's okay. That's where they're at. But for me, it was confirmation, and I went with it. And so that's when I started my channel, because I was curious to know and how to make sense of this. Because I'll tell you something, I could not understand how I could do this and people in America or wherever were starting to feel things. And it just did not make any sense to me. And at first I thought, as you were saying, is it something that I send? It isn't to do with sending. So the way that he explains it is that we receive. And because we're collapsing the separation, I receive. And because I receive, the other person receives. So it isn't even about subject to subject. The duality is collapsed. And that's where I suppose I started to just think, what is this? What is this? And that's when perhaps Rupert Spira came onto my radar, and I understood this non-dual thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Ooh, that's powerful. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I'm curious about the non-dual. How do you communicate with kind of like a traditional dualistic field of Christians out there? How do you communicate some of these truths and insights that you've gained over the years? What do you do to kind of like bridge that gap?
It is a gap, and it's a huge gap. And you're spot on to say, because so many, in a way, the Salvation Army that I realize now that was quite different to other churches, in that we don't have the sacraments, we don't have baptism, we don't have, oh, I say we, I'm not a member now, but there's no sacraments, no baptism, no communion. And those are kind of external thing. The reason being that it's not being reliant on respect the other churches, of course, but not reliant on outward forms of grace. It's all internal. And so for many people, there is an attachment either to those things or to the belief system. And at first I'll tell you what it was at the beginning. It was really trying to help support people perhaps who were deconstructing, because I know that I did that, although when I was doing it maybe 20 years ago or more, 25 years ago, there wasn't such a word. That didn't exist. It was quite lonely. And so I had friends that were in that community, but I had some friends that I could talk to more freely and who were more progressive and more open, but it was a lonely path. And in my first marriage, my first husband was really quite fundamental Christian. And so that caused some conflict, really, because I was this wishy-washy liberal. We didn't agree on certain things, but it was really all tied up with, and for a lot of people it is tied up with your relationships, with your culture, with your support network. So it's often suppressed because you just go along with it. And I found that I was being fake. I'd go along and I wasn't feeling it, and it didn't feel faking it, and I couldn't keep doing that. So for me, I went to a different church. I started to go to the Anglican church, which was a big old Norman building, and it was a sense of the sacred, and I just sort of experienced a bit of connection there.
Cool.
And
love that.
Yeah.
I love that every now and then, a little dose of those like gothic sacred spaces. You know what I mean? These people they're going at full they're committed to this thing here. You know what I mean? It's quiet in here. There's maybe some candles. I love that. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. How do you regard the scriptures?
How do I what? Sorry.
How do you regard the scriptures in light of kind of like some of your understandings?
That it's inspired, but then so are a lot of things inspired. And I think that my study as well meant that I think it's quite healthy to have a sort of scholarly approach alongside it, so that you're able to know things. You see, for me, here's the main thing. I wanted to get back to I wanted to know what Jesus understood. And how he understood God. I just wanted, I would want to be at the feet of him, learning from him and ask him. So from my point of view, it's about the primary source. Go straight to that primary source. And, there are two things running alongside. You can ask him, because you've got this connection that's a direct connection through a kind of telepathic connection. You can
Yeah.
have that thought, ask thought, and thought replies. But also you can look, and so a lot of Christianity is based on, say, the Nicene Creed that is 300 years later after Jesus. So I'd ask things like, did Jesus know this about himself? Some of the things that Christians and theologians later said
Yeah.
about Jesus. Did
Good
he have the
question.
understanding of himself?
Mm-hmm.
And so really to go back to his teaching, that's for me primary, which is of course the Beatitudes, and even studying the Beatitudes in Aramaic. I can't speak Aramaic, but, learning some of the
Yeah.
meaning in the original so that you try to get back to the original meaning of what he might be saying. And I honestly think that coming back to it, having discovered non-duality in a way, I then read into the teachings of Jesus in a completely different way. And that's really what I'm doing on my channel, just exploring that. And every time I get an idea that's juicy, just sharing it. And
Have you ever heard of this? I think you've brought it up before. There's this like little talked about period of that may or may not have happened where Jesus went to the east.
Yeah,
and
I was
studied.
just thinking about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
How fascinating would that be? You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
the more we can extrapolate and learn.
The lost years. And so,
Yeah.
we have him at age 12, and then we don't see him again till age, what, 30 is it? Or is it 30?
Yeah.
And so that's a long time to be away, and quite late to start your ministry as well. I mean, we know that Jesus was a rabbi, because he must have studied and really known the teaching. You have to know the scripture, word for word. And so to be walking along the Sea of Galilee and saying, "Follow me," he was a rabbi, so they all had their own like disciples around them, but they all had their own sort of style and emphasis. So he was ethical teaching. But yeah, there's these stories that his uncle Joseph of Arimathea was a silk trader, and so that would have meant traveling to the east, and it would make sense that he was open to a lot. It depends how much you think he was learning that as a human being, or whether it was just because he was gone. But what I argue with Christians is that if we're saying that he's fully human, then if you're saying he had a special knowledge because he was divine in a way that isn't like us, then that doesn't cohere with him being fully human. He either was fully human or he wasn't fully human. And you just get different portraits of Jesus in each of the different gospels, very different emphasis about him. So in some ways it's a mystery, but
worth investigating, because whether you believe or not, Jesus had look at the ridiculous impact on the world that Christ's character and that is, like, whatever it is, it's a mystery worth exploring. And when you start exploring it, it seems to you could think about it for forever. I'm curious as to your thoughts on the other guy, El Satanus, the devil. One thing, for whatever reason, a term has come to my mind, and it's a little bit controversial, but it is because sometimes the devil's or the Satan is described as the father of lies.
Yeah.
And one thing, a term that I now have to say is logic is the father of lies.
Okay.
But we still use logic. We still need logic. And I'm wondering, with your mystical understandings, what you could say. Do we understand Satan perfectly, or is there a misunderstanding going on? Maybe even the relationship between Satan and Jesus.
A brilliant question. I think, firstly, Satan is, people think of him as a being, like a being. In mythology, is portrayed as a being. If you look in the scriptures and you look when it says Satan, it says the Satan. So in the Greek, it's the Satan, which means important. The adversary, the enemy. So it's the opponent and the accuser. There are different ways of it being interpreted. I tell you something that I find really helpful, and I might be going off at a tangent, but it is going to bring me back to what you've asked. David Bingham, who is a non-dual teacher, and he uses this reference to the koshers, which is again borrowed from Hinduism, and the idea of the koshas is that there are different layers to the being. And so on the body, in the dual, it explains this interaction between duality and non-duality, because it's sort of in gradations that we have it. And it starts on the outside. If we were like Russian dolls, the outside as being the flesh body. So that's the physical body, the material. And then the next layer, there are 5 of them. And then the next layer would be the energetic body, or the subtle body. And that's sort of where I sometimes get tingles. I sometimes find that you get these tingles.
I was just having them. I don't know if it's a coffee or just good conversation endorphins.
This does not surprise me. This does not surprise me. In fact, I meant to say at the beginning, I hope for anyone watching, and I just set this intention now, that if anything resonates, anything that's said and resonates, and you will feel an activation. It always happens. It happens when I do reconnective healing. It happens often in my videos. It'll happen sometimes when people will say they will watch things back even years later and they're feeling things in the body. And I think that's why at the beginning I gave an example of this visceral feeling in the body. And that's something that's really reassuring, because it's saying it's not out there. You know, duality, as I understand, is out. You think of God out there and far away. You've got to try and get to God or understand God. This is actually bringing it not only home to you, but it's the most real inner part of you, which makes sense of Psalm 139, which says, where can I go from your presence? Where can I flee from you if I go to the heavens? Right. If I go to the depths of the ocean. So we cannot ever be away from God. And in Advaita Vedanta just says, there's only God. There is only God.
Yes.
But then you have the subtle, that this is still in the dualistic, okay, because it's the place of where there are form and thought and, concepts. Then we go to the mind body, which is still in where the mental realm, the thoughts and emotions. And so those are the 3 outer layers, if you have your Russian doll, that are dualistic. And then we go to the non-dual. We've got the wisdom body, and then the bliss body, the body of bliss. And so the wisdom body, it is where you're in the non-dual. You've collapsed the separation. So what do I mean by separation? That sense that we think that we're in a world where there are objects and things. I'm a subject and object. You are separate to me. I'm talking to you.
Thought stuff.
Collapsing the separation is just bringing it back to awareness, and knowing that everything that seems separate is an arising in consciousness.
We can help people right now. I'm sorry, I can't wait. We can help people right now, because within Christianity, the body is referred to as the temple. Look at the ridiculous importance all of a sudden on the body. And I think I know what might be helpful. If people are like, I can't get it, I don't feel it, I don't this and that. It's like, well, do you even feel your body? Like, do you even feel your toes and your toe joints and your ankle and your leg and your thigh and your chakras and every single part of your body? Do you even feel it? And I think when people go in to feel their body, they go, it's an agony. I'm in pain.
Yeah.
And so I think the helping thing is to realize what you're talking about, that God, which is here, that you can start to get a full experience of through the temple, which is described as through the body itself. You got to get that nonsense out of there. Like, that's an exorcism. That's the exorcising of the demons. The house is full. It's full of demons. I got to get them out.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be?
Yes, and that brings us back to your idea about Satan and what is the adversary. If this is when we're in the mental emotional realm, because you're right that if I don't know, I think it's Galatians, I'm not sure, but there's this reference to the prince of the power of the air, and I think doesn't that make sense in terms of consciousness? The air is the consciousness. It's the mind, the thoughts that come. A lot of your struggle is with the thoughts, invasive thoughts. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so, and you can lose your energy to these thoughts if you just
logical conclusions. I can only reason that because I was harmed, I should harm. We live in a realm of harm. You're logicking too much. Yeah. How do you feel in your body? I don't feel good. Why? Well, I got a lot of negative thoughts. Like, I'm interjecting too much, but. Yeah,
because we've got so many strands we can go on, but you're right. And this idea is that people think they want to escape from the body as well. That spiritual bypass, wanting to just escape from the body. Yes. And so, like my spirit is crying for leaving, the Led Zeppelins.
Mute my body, turn the volume down with chemicals. I just got to turn the noise down in here. Yes.
Yes. Yes. So it's actually being comfortable at home in the body. And this idea that we're going further inward is a lovely idea because it's saying come home to the truth of who you are in your essential nature, in the ground of all your being.
Yeah.
And that's where you find the bliss, the peace, the happiness. A lovely thing that we could even do now, I invite people to sort of do, is just to do a little exercise if we can. So they hopefully might just be an introduction to this if it's completely new.
Yeah.
But just asking the question, you might want to gently close your eyes, but just asking the question, who is here? Who is it that is here? And the first thing you answer is your name. You'll say, well, it's Jill, it's James, Justin, because that's part of our conditioning, but that's the identity that we have that is part of the body mind construct. So let's for a moment say, yeah, that's true. It's true at one of the layers and one of the levels. But let's park that. Let's, as it were, take that layer off, almost like it's a coat, hang it on the peg, and then think, now, who is it that is here? Because we'll notice that awareness is still here. So, what is that awareness? Who is that awareness? And that awareness is the ground of the being that you share. You share that awareness with everyone and everything. And that's a place that you just come home to. And you can come home to that at any time. And when it all gets too much, the mind, it's just knowing that that's part of the mental, emotional body, that it's only one aspect, but you can reduce that and go further inward. And what happens is, rather than losing something when you've stepped out of the identity of the small separate self, rather than losing, you've actually found something. I mean, this is like finding treasure in the field. This is something that's more expansive because it connects you with the all. And you know, that wisdom that is a field of information, energy, light, and information. And then at the inner, as you go deeper and deeper, it's just bliss. It's just being. And there's nothing to resist because there's no thought. We've moved beyond a realm of thinking and concepts and logic, as you say, which was the realm of the dualistic realm and the voices and the enemy. But here there's nothing to resist. There is no enemy because there's only that field of oneness. You know, it's that field of that Rumi speaks of, where he says there is a place, be it a field beyond right doing and wrong doing. I'll meet you there. And so just know that that is there all the time. That is who you truly are. That is the witnessing presence. And it's bliss. But as you move out of that now, you can take back that identity. We move through these layers all the time. So from this place of effortlessness, where there's nothing to do, no one to be, nothing to defend, you know, just pure essential being. We then move back and take the identity back, put the coat back on. Just remember that I'm this being, this identity that is Jill, that has roles, has a life, has things to do, and interacts with other separate, seemingly separate selves. And just become aware of the room that you're in and open your eyes. And
you have got a skill there. That is, yeah. That's wonderful. That the guided meditation. Do you have those on your channel?
Sometimes I have written them. I've written them for use with children in school because I was a primary teacher for 20 years. And this guiding, because it's experiential, it's trying to get people to touch on an experience that then they think this. Because
make a video with that. Make a video with that, because that could be that you guided so well there. You know, every part of that was masterful. It was really good.
And maybe somebody felt something, you know, maybe somebody actually just felt something in the activation. And that's really what I do in reconnective healing, because it's whatever the person, see, here's the thing, there may be people and their attitudes and what they say might be very different to your own, their opinions, their political views, whatever. And you might dislike that person in the human, in the mental, emotional being body when we're functioning there, because we move in and out of this functioning all the time. You may not like that person, but when you collapse that separation, go into that field, there's only that oneness. We share the same being. So there's a compassion, and that's the place of healing. And I really think that's what Jesus was trying to teach.
Oh yeah.
When he said, he used that I always give this as an example. He was using a parable about the king and about his subjects. The king might say to, when you do something for the others, whenever you do something for the sick person, or give a cup of water to the child, or clothe the person that's naked, or feed the hungry, you're doing it as unto me.
Yeah. Whatever you do to the least of my brethren, you do to me. Visiting people in jail, all kinds of different things, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've always understood that, and it's always usually taught to be, it's like Jesus is pleased with you because you're being a good person and you're following his teaching.
Christians listen to that. Whatever you do to the least of my brother, but I think there's so much room if you start listening to the Father Eli's logic to go, the least of my brethren. He specified that it's my brother, and it's like, who's your brother? Who's your neighbor? It's everyone.
But he says you do it unto me. He could have said you do it for me, or I'm pleased with you, and you do it. You're remembering what I've taught you. But he says unto me. What could that possibly mean, except that is me?
Right. Yeah.
Could you also say, for whoever you do this to, you're also doing it to yourself, almost in the same. When you said who's here, you know what answer came to my mind? Yeah. My own name didn't come to mind when you started your meditation, and you said who's here right now, and I went in where the word that came to mind was the,
which is another for it is, or I am, but without anything qualified, just the
but it wasn't my own name, oddly enough.
Isness, yes, or isness
is and also the Spanish el. You know what I mean? Like just all these titles like that. But it actually, it's a janky connection, but it goes to what you're saying. But couldn't it also be whatever you do to yourself, you're doing to me? Yes, 100%. But I think that the diseases were overly self-driven. It's like, if you could actually save yourself from considering yourself, you know what I mean? Like, what happens is you've mastered considering your own lot. For most people, you know what I mean? Like, we're the master of considering our own situation. Your salvation might be found, a saving aspect might be found in inverting that and just being pure, realizing that you're floating in God right now. So what is God up to? What does God look like?
What is God doing, experiencing this multiplicity? And what you said, James, when you said, you said something then, what was it now?
Something about whatever you do to these, you do to yourself.
Do to yourself. So it made me think about the law. And so if you're in duality and you really believe people are separate because of the human nature, or the matrix programming, which is of the lower nature, which is, I'll just get what I can for myself, which is selfish. I mean, there's so much we could talk about. We could talk about the Pistis Sophia and how that models for us the lower realms and the archons pulling you into these lower realms, and how Sophia wisdom gets stuck in these lower realms. But this idea that you're doing it, that you're grabbing things for yourself, because we're all programmed to think I need to have some advantage to others. We're in competition with all these other 7 billion beings. And once you understand non-duality, when you understand there's only one of us here,
yes,
the same being, then the need for the law sort of collapses. You see that it's a temporary thing. So in a dualistic framework, which Judaism, Christianity is, you have the 10 Commandments and you have the law. And what Jesus found himself in was this that's where the religiosity comes in, because it's the law, and you need to keep the law, and it holds a space for kind of morality and for civilization and for ethics, because you need to keep the law, and if you don't, there'll be consequences. But people will try to get around that. People will get away with things, and that's how you get the injustices in the world. Because but if everyone came to this realization, then what advantage is there of stealing all from everyone else so that the other person is hungry? Because it's yourself you've impoverished and made hungry. It's just an aspect of you.
There's a treasure chest that just opened up out of this conversation. I have to interject.
Yeah.
What if everybody knew that we were all one thing? We have to address something, which is that even if somebody's open to that and they go, okay, fine, it's all one thing. But you hurt me. But I was hurt. I think that you can pull from Byron Katie's book and go, okay, I understand. You were really young and they hurt you. But didn't you hurt you too? And it's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, somebody might have hurt you, but you went on to hurt yourself for like 20 years after that, hurting yourself over that hurt. If you stub your toe on the bed, you're not like saw the bed in half. You watch your toe from now on. Yeah. But I'm saying, I think the problem is why people maybe get more and more concreted out of being able to really realize the unity thing that you're talking about is because of the logical conclusion that, well, I was hurt, I was naive, I was Disney World, and somebody really hurt me bad. It's like, pain exists. Pain is out there. But you really hurt yourself 5,000 times more than that person hurt you. You've just been labeling it as them.
Yeah. And if we come back to when you think about, I said earlier, about what was the essence of Jesus' teaching, it was compassion and forgiveness. And people think, oh, forgiveness is just so weak. You almost feel, sometimes people hold on to their grudges because they feel it gives them a little bit of power. I am not going to forgive that person.
Yeah. Now I'll be able to avoid it.
Leverage for getting one over on that person, almost wishing bad things happen to them. But the forgiveness, the power of forgiveness, it comes. Oh, there's so much to say. It's where to go. It comes back to that it alters things in the patterning of the matrix. So I've got this book called you can't see it. You can't see it because I've done this thing. I've done silly things and I've blurred out the background. So it's called My Forgiveness Journal, and it's really about Ho'oponopono, which is this practice of forgiveness.
Ho'oponopono. Yeah, yes. We're familiar.
Ho'oponopono. And so that's, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. And it started off being something they used in Hawaii in tribes. It's for reconciliation within tribal families. So, but of course, Dr. Hulen, when he met Namona Simeona, developed it into something because he used it in that hospital. Remember, in the hospital, I went to as a psychiatrist, or he at this hospital where there were a lot of real people that were severely mentally ill and been there a long time. The staff were ringing in sick because it was so awful to work there. And when he walked in, he didn't even visit any of the people, that the patients. He just looked at their files and he did that thing. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you. What was he doing? He's collapsing the separation and he's taking 100% responsibility. That's the key teaching. Take 100% responsibility. You think, I'm resisting that. In the dualistic, we resist that. I'm not taking responsibility. You were in the wrong, which is what you were just saying, Justin. You were in the wrong. The foolishness of it, it's not the foolishness, it's just the futility of it, because what you're doing is the patterns will repeat and repeat and repeat. And they go on, handed down ancestrally through the generations, and they exist, those patterns, in what we might call the collective unconscious. They're just there, and we're picking up on that all the time, and we're running that program whether we realize it or not, because our mind isn't our own. Our mind's out here. Our mind's like sponges. So the point is, these patterns, Ho'oponopono addresses this fact we need to clean the patterns, so that the memories, so that they don't repeat. And this is what he did with these patients, by simply doing, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, I thank you, looking at their files and doing it as them. So it's this stepping into the space as them, taking on. But now, does this remind you of anything about the atonement? Jesus
taking the sin upon yourself.
Taking the sin upon yourself so that it can be cleaned.
I think people do this in all kinds of ways. Like, I think I've done it in my own self in a way, like, Jesus is such a grand, I'm not going to say something megalomaniac here. It's going to be reasonable. Just give me a sec. In a way that Jesus was like, okay, you freaking desert barbarians, I'll let you kill me and I'll bleed for you. And then you can turn this, be good to each other, for God's sake. After I'm gone, be good. I think people do this in work situations and in family situations where they're like, I'll be the scapegoat. I'll be the clown. I'll be the this, whatever makes you people feel better about yourselves. I'll be that thing. I'll be what you've elected me to be. And in some ways, Christ was elected to be some kind of ultimate sacrifice, especially when you're going back thousands of years and you like do a little bit of history lessons and you realize the brutal history we've got as humans, like brutal to each other. It's a miracle we can even invented love, you know. But I think people do this unknowingly. I think that they there's versions of a martyrdom like that you forget you're even doing. It's like I'm acting a clown, or I'm acting goofy, or I'm acting funny, or I'm acting like the leader, or I'm acting like whatever, because that's what I've been elected to be. And now it's a sacrifice. I'm sacrificing for everybody else. This is like this goes on and on. You could untie this yarn ball forever. Yeah. But anyway, sorry.
Repeat. And in what happened was that gradually people were just getting better, and then patients were leaving and staff were coming back to work, and it just closed. In the end, they shut the hospital because there was no need for it anymore. So right. How does that work? And what you said, it's the I think that this patterning. I'll say this because it might be appropriate to say it now, that there's the Christ template, which is doing the atoning that we can all wear. I mean, we all have either we're in the Adam, which is the running the sort of patterns, or the Christ, where we're taking responsibility 100%, doing the Ho'oponopono and cleaning. And in a way, it's Christ is still doing that. The atonement is still happening in us and through us, and yet there's only one here. It's difficult to say. Dr. Hugh Leonard say, don't teach this to other people, you just do it. There aren't other people. This is the frustration with non-duality. It isn't about trying to get 7 billion people to transform each as individual, because you're still working in a dualistic framework there, thinking there's all these separate. You just go back to a place of non-duality. You just do the cleaning, and it's amazing what happens.
Oh yeah,
amazing. What happens.
That guy was essentially going along. Look at what happened. He healed those people by looking at their medical charts and apologizing and saying forgiveness things, like based on data from a chart. Like, I'm going to take on the responsibility, the burden of this, but like in a relinquishing way, in like a resolving way.
Yes.
There's something just powerful about that. Just about inverting the responsibility there. I know it's very hard, and what you were just saying there, that's what I was trying to say, is when you said don't go telling people about this, just do it yourself.
Do it.
That's growing more and more fascinating to me as like a mouthpiece. As like I'm like a mouthpiece. I come on here and talk, and I'm like, but my logic fails me.
No.
Is it? Yeah. So I think what ends up happening is that there's a going with the flow aspect of it, where it's everything's situationally appropriate. Our egos are the ones that go, I got to be doing more, or compare ourselves to this or that. It's like, enjoy precisely what you've been elected to be. Enjoy the exact situation that you're in, because if you start projecting into the future ideas of what should be, or where I should be, or what I should be doing, or the reach I should have, or how can I help people, you get out of that river of like that is just going to take you to where you're supposed to go.
And it clears the way. I mean, if it clears the way, this is the prayer, Morna Simona, the full prayer. So for people just watching and listening, just this is the prayer. It says, if my family, relatives, ancestors have offended you, your family, relatives, ancestors, in thought, word, deed, or action, since the beginning of our creation to the present moment, we ask your forgiveness.
Yeah.
Let this cleanse, purify, release, cut all the negative memories, bonds, energies, and vibrations, and transmute these unwanted energies, could be enemies, into pure light. And that is so powerful. And if you practice that and do that, I find not only are you don't know all the stuff, we don't know what's going on, it's the unconscious. And I think there's a passage in the Bible that says, the Holy Spirit prays in groans we don't understand. It's just, we don't need to understand, but in doing the clearing and the cleaning, we're erasing patterns that would otherwise repeat, and you don't know how powerful and effective that would be. But you don't need to know it with the mind, because you'll start to experience it, because what happens is things will change. It's like you're clearing the path and way, and then unexpectedly things start to flow in your life. The job opportunities. I mean, this was my story. I was practicing the Ho'oponopono and practicing for 18 minutes sitting a day. And unexpectedly, then this job opportunity came. I never thought would be. It was a perfect job for me. It's just a 2-year contract, and I'm loving every minute. But I'm learning a lot on it, and I'm able
Awesome.
to. But this is what I'm saying. You will be amazed at what actually happens. So the mind can't explain it or understand it. But it's like forget that.
Oh yeah.
You
The
have the
mind will
invitation.
always want to infiltrate. It's like I'm in the river of flow. I'm
Yeah,
actually enjoying my life. Go figure. Like,
yeah,
wait a sec. I'm enjoying my. Uh-oh. I better covet this situation that I've created for myself. And you're off the track already. Like, there's too much mind introduced. It's weird because we use it as a tool. Like, the mind is obviously, we have it for good reason. And same with reason, and same with logic, and same with math, and everything we see before us. All
mm,
things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial at any given time, or something like that. You
mm.
know, um, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it is wonderful if you can get into that state and stave off the tendency to overanalyze and get the ego back integrated and selfish tendencies and grandiosity. If you can, it's always going to be tempting. I think this happens
You
to
use the word
certain
tempting.
teachers.
Yeah, you use the
Sorry.
word tempting. No, you know that it is. It's just an invitation. The mind gives you an invitation, and
Yeah.
you've got the choice. You don't have to take it up. And you
Yeah.
use the word tempting because it's
Yeah.
kind of it lures you in. It
Yes.
lures you in, and you get. So I mentioned the Pistis Sophia earlier, which is a Gnostic text, but it's fascinating text. In that story, Sophia, wisdom, who would be in that place of oneness and union with the divine feminine to Christ, and she's tempted in and she falls and she's in these lower eons. This is just mythology, by the way. I'm not saying I
Yeah.
believe this. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
mythology that illustrates. They all illustrate truth, and these lower each of the layers or levels are ruled over by an archon, and she gets trapped. Why? Because it's tempting. She gets lured in, and then she
Yeah.
can't make her way back to the pleroma, to the place of oneness.
Yeah.
And so it's Christ descends into collects her and takes her back up. But this is just we can
Uh,
get trapped in these, but it's only we can move in and out of these layers, these levels. It's a bit like Jacob's ladder. You
yeah.
think about the rock. He's lying and
Yes.
sleeping. He's on the rock. The rock represents the material.
Yeah.
Okay, so just like those koshas, the material, and then he's sleeping, he's dreaming, he's in the mental, emotional, and the subtle body, and then these angels are coming up and down. There's these layers. They're coming up and they're going down. These are the
Mm-hmm.
messengers.
Mm-hmm.
And this place of the wisdom body that I mentioned, that's part of the non-dual, it's where we receive messages. It opens up this field of energy, light, and information. So you get access to so much information, and like people call it the Akashic records. It's just there, available for everyone.
I feel like I've experienced people coming down a few layers to help me out. You know what I
Yes,
mean? Like I'm freaking hanging out in the mire, in the mist at the bottom, and
yes,
somebody parts the clouds and reaches in even for a moment to help. That's
yeah.
I've like experienced something like that.
And that's where you get the
Um,
word medium, because medium just means a middle point. So if it's energies are coming from a higher vibrational place,
yeah.
and we're in a very low dense vibration, in the middle, that's where there can be communication, and it can be just by telepathy and thought.
If
But
if you get to the zenith, if you get to the top, for
yeah,
the love of God, don't take the final temptation, which is I'm special.
mm,
Don't take the bread. You know what I'm saying? That seems to be like one of the higher level things is the authentic questioning. Am I special? Am I like special here? Don't do it. Don't think you're
it may
special.
have been the fall of Lucifer because he was the
Uh
highest
huh.
angel. He was higher than
Yeah.
Michael, but it
When you're
was.
swinging on a star, it's the biggest temptation.
I want to have the rule for myself. It's about me, and then that's where he
Yes.
got the rule, and the rule in the way is Earth. So people say, well, who's in control of the world and the Earth? But if you look at the Bible, the mythology of the Bible, it's actually the enemy. It's Lucifer. It's
Yes.
Satan.
Yep.
It's the powers of the air and the rulers of the air.
Uh
And
huh.
that's why Paul contrasts that and says, but we have the mind of Christ. So in other words, you can move into the mind of Christ, which from isn't me, in my understanding, is the non-dual. Jesus taught us the prayer and said, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Think of the Jacob's ladder again. He's pointing to the non-dual. He was trying to give us the vision of the non-dual. dual, and that's how he was teaching us
Yes.
to pray.
Wonderful.
Can I
Wonderful.
come to that really, really quick?
Yeah, yeah. No, sure. Oh,
Only
I was
that
just
when
gonna.
you're talking, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, because you mentioned prayer there. Do non-dual Christians pray? And if they do, who do they pray to?
Exactly. That's a brilliant question. So for a long time, I didn't. I thought I don't pray because I don't believe in an interventionist God. What's the point of this praying? Because it's as though you're trying to ask for an answer, and sometimes you're getting a no. And like I say, this sort of Zeus, Yahweh, Zeus figure in the sky. I don't believe in that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my frustration is that with the when people say that they've stopped believing and therefore they've become atheists, and then you ask them what does it actually mean, they say I don't believe in God, and they'll give a reason why they don't believe in God. I'll say same. It's kind of like assuming that because I might still say that I'm a Christian. And by the way, the reason I did bring non-dual Christian and start using the word Christian and felt uncomfortable with it at first was to sort of say there are different ways of being a Christian.
Yes.
Because if you just go by the people who have the biggest channel, make the loudest noise, you're going to think that's Christianity. And it's not good, Pia. It's not good.
And people have a hard time with anything that's two things. You know what I mean? It's like pick a side and you're like, it's not true though. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be true if I picked a side here.
So to answer your question about prayer, it is about taking a request and just sitting with it in that place of bringing it. I use visualization a lot. I love it. I use visualization. I go into this place that is almost like a round white place. I use a house. I go into a house and I can go in different rooms in the house, and that's where I can meet different beings. So, like if you have a book and you're reading a book and you want to understand a book, you think, I'd love to be able to ask the author a question about that. Well, you can in the place of the wisdom body and the non-dual, just in your imagination. So imagination can really be helpful. So although we're still using images and concepts, it's just in the imaginal realm, you can really get a lot of wisdom that way. But I would just go to this place that for me is a big like circular white room. It has no ceiling on, you just see the sky, and there's a round sort of altar.
So interesting.
Beautiful.
We're actually a lot alike, Jill, whether you know it or not, because I've done
like
similar things.
Yeah. And
where
you just
I step into the round and there's darkness all around, but there's sort of like a spotlighted area, and I'll like conjure Osho maybe, or conjure Jesus, and I'll be like, just putting feelers out there. Is there any entity out there that wants to converse with me? And part of the answer, I think, to like, why would you pray if it's all one thing? It's like for answers, for an answer, for a conversation, for whatever. You know what I mean? That's like saying, why talk to James? Because he's me. So there's no point in me talking to him, which who knows? Maybe there's some deep mystical wisdom in that. But I'm saying I do because he's there. You know what I mean? So why would you talk?
I don't conjure. I don't conjure a person. I have this round like altar that's raised. It's like a sort of marble. I don't know. And I just think about the person. So I know that I'm in that space where I'm saying, I'm sort of treating it as an altar, but it's more for focusing. So if I'm thinking of a person, visualize that person, then I just place them there. And then I might just see the light, and I might just see almost like the fire. This image of fire just refined so that anything is whatever needs to be cleansed, just doing the whole, I'm sorry, please. And then whatever is left is pure just for that person or situation or thing. It can help to have a visual symbol for that. But then I just leave it, and I just know that it's going, so that's the one form of prayer.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I don't know why it came to me, but for some reason when you guys were kind of like going back and forth there about the forgiveness thing, I was thinking about the year of Jubilee, kind of like the external physical representation of forgiveness, and then just imagining what it might be like if someone created like a new law of an internal year of Jubilee. Imagine everyone was given free reign to just unbag all their wrong, all their hurt, and it was going to be forgiven across the board. How much better that would be than just like being forgiven of your debts, your physical cash.
That's biblical too. Confess your sins one to another and God will heal your land, or whatever. I totally am a proponent of that. I mean, that's going to take some bravery, and it's going to take some initial
trust,
letting go of the reins. But I think that could be very healing, is to unburden your, like, to make a point of being like, I'm feeling guilt for this, and I need to like get it out there, and confessing your sins one to another.
Yeah.
And all you can do is all you can really do is start with yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, because but you might think, well, what difference will that make? Because I'm one among 7 billion, and what
Mhm.
non-duality tells you is there's only one here. So
Mhm.
when you are going to the self, you are just cleansing. Now the thing is, some people talk about shadow work, and then it becomes something you have to do. Like I've got to work through this and work through that.
Mhm.
And I think that what's more helpful than because that's hard work. That's not effortless.
Mhm.
There is a different way. There's a more direct path that aligns more with the non-dual teaching
Mm.
of effortless being. That is to say, I become less, he becomes more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
The
that's
teaching
the better way.
of John the Baptist, I become less, he becomes more. And certainly, I've got a book here, The Path to No Self. I can't show it because it won't show.
I can see when you get it right in front of you. I can see it when you put it right in
Burn,
front of you. There you
burn
go.
there in front of my face. No,
Oh,
it's still not.
there.
Bernadette Roberts, The Path to Yourself, and she really sort of uses that. And it's this dying to the self. It's like Paul says, "It's no longer I that lives, but Christ that lives in me." And what I would normally think that is just constantly denying oneself. So you think, is this meaning the ascetic life where it's all there's no joy in life because I've just got to be in denial. I've got to not allow you. But that's a reductionist way of thinking what it is. What it really is do I want to keep always in the ego seat of living as Jill? I mean, I know sometimes I do have to do that because there's things that need doing, right? That I've got to make the tea later and I've got to go to work and I've got to ring the bank and I need to know that it's my identity when I'm ringing up about my bank. I can't say I'm not really here. There's times when you have to be in that mode of being. But if I just live for me, is that going to be really fulfilling, or will I have achieved anything? For anybody watching who's thinking, I just want to make a difference in the world. And you know what? It's often when you come to the end of your tether. For people who usually through some crisis or depression or whatever, and they might come to thought, I just want to end it. I don't want to be here anymore.
Mm.
That's when you're really genuinely not interested or invested in defending the person anymore. The ego, the
Yes.
person. And if you
100.
come to that point, that is the point at which there can be a breakthrough, because then you think, well, okay, let's pretend I've ended it. But don't end it, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Let's pretend I have. What is
Uh-huh.
left? I can just be the pure essential being. This is
Yeah.
what it's meant. It's no longer I that lives, as in the ego, but
Yes,
Christ
Christ
that lives
lives
in
through
me.
me.
And who's the Christ? Christ is the human being.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I really wanted to talk about. Christ is the human being. There's a theologian called Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and you might know of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was the person who, during the 1930s in Germany, he helped assist the resistance in a plot to assassinate Hitler. Okay, and he's a controversial theologian for that reason, because some people say, thou shalt not kill. He shouldn't have been doing that. He saw what was happening. And he famously said, and this is really controversial, as I say, he famously said, you must live as though God doesn't exist. We must grow up. We must come of age. We must live as though God doesn't exist. And people thought, well, that's blasphemy because God doesn't. It's what it's saying is, you can't step back and say, if God is going to stop this war or needs to stop this person or doesn't want this
Right.
president or whatever, then God will intervene. That's the belief in an interventionist God.
Yeah.
Who is here? I am here.
Yeah.
We are the hands and feet. We
Yes.
are here.
The
And so
body. Yeah.
that was why he made that choice to do what he did. And
Oh
he
yeah.
said that when God incarnated, he didn't incarnate as a human being. And that's what the Christian story tells us. He incarnated as a human being, Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, the one person in history. He said he incarnated as humanity, So we then take the all in the one human being. And that comes back to taking 100%. So yes, Jesus demonstrated that and modeled it on the cross because he was Jesus, the Christ, and he was modeling that. But that can be repeated in your life. If I say I don't want Jill anymore, and I sometimes do this, I do this in prayer. You asked how I pray. I might say, right, I'm sitting, I'm having my 18 minutes. I can hang Jill up. I just literally say I'm stepping out of the separate self. I know that I'll pick her up in 20 minutes time. I've got stuff to do, but I'm stepping out. What is left?
Yeah.
And then we say it's Christ, because it's no longer I that lives, but Christ that lives in me.
Right.
That means, and this is where faith comes in, that Christ is still here. That means it's Christ that's doing the work of atonement. That means it's Christ that's praying. That is powerful. That is,
Christ being synonymous with consciousness itself, like
yeah. And if there's
pure
one,
unmuddied consciousness. It's funny because I was talking to a Christian not too long ago, and I was explaining to them, like, we were having a good Christianese conversation. You know what I mean? We're talking Christianese to each other, and they're like a fundamentalist to some degree, like pretty strong degree fundamentalist Christian. And I said, my goal is to die to myself
yeah.
and Christ to be looking through my eyes at you. That's what I want. And I was surprised that despite how fluid the conversation was, that it was like I got a little bit of like a no, because my soul's going to go to heaven. And then it was like a reemergence of this ego idea that I'm going to die and then I got to go live forever with Jesus. And I'm like trying to explain, like, I want the Justin. I don't care about Justin. I want Christ to be living through me, and that be the one. Wouldn't that be a better minister than whatever shitty baggage Justin has?
I've done that as an experiment. You can do that as an experiment. You can think, like in my work that I do, I think, right, I'm going out on the streets in a minute. I'm going to just let Jill, it's going to be Christ that's walking down that street, because I've mentally done it. And if you actually bring your attention and mentally do that, you are looking in a different way. When Jill's in the driving seat, I'm on autopilot, but I'm also thinking about a million things. And I miss people. Right, I'm not present for people. But if I step that aside and say it's Christ that's walking down, I'll notice things I don't normally notice. And you'll find that if you're talking to someone, they're looking in your eye. Do they see something? You know, I've known people just start crying because they're seeing something. You say something and you don't know what you're saying, because the words that come into your head to say are from some higher place, because you're just channeling it, really. You're channeling it.
Oh God, it goes both ways. You could be looking at someone and they're unconscious to their suffering, and you're crying looking at them. And they're like robotically. And before it gets too far away, I wanted to talk about shadow work real quick. Can we jump back to that for a moment? Because you briefly mentioned shadow work, and then sort of like how it's maybe not necessary because you can ascend that ladder with Christ's help or something like that. I just wanted to touch on shadow work.
Yeah, shadow work.
The shadow, working with the shadow.
Okay, so this probably is my reference to this is from Carl Jung.
Yes.
Carl Jung, who was a hugely, I was introduced to Carl Jung when I was at university, and then has been hugely influential in my understanding of Christianity, because it's all the things that we can't cope with, or that are not acceptable to us because of our conditioning. And I think Christians suffer a lot with this, because you have to be this certain thing. So they push a lot down into shadow. I mean, and then if it's in shadow, it'll find its way back up to consciousness, because it's a child that's actually just wanting to be accepted. I say a child, it's just an aspect of the self that is not accepted, that's been judged, and that's been pushed away. So it'll find its way up, usually in an unhealthy way. I mean, an example of that is in the church, where this celibacy, you know, that priests are celibate, and pushing it down. And what you find is that in the Christianity as a whole is generally obsessed with sex. You know, their morality is all around sex. And the purity culture, it's very damaging, because things aren't allowed to just be natural. It's just you're suppressing, and it'll find its way up. And then it finds its way up in some, well, like in the paedophilia and all these things like this that are going on, that's unhealthy and unwholesome. And so it's I think understanding about the unconscious and depth psychology is a really good help. And psyche, at the end, remember, just means soul. The Greek word psyche just means soul. Yeah. So what we're doing, it's the science of the soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what Carl Jung was trying to do was map the soul. And and I think that what I love about it is when we talk about going to the depths, this again, we can map this pattern of Christianity. And when it talks about Christ descending into hell, he you know, in the Creed, it talks about him descending into hell, and then on the third day, what is he doing when he's going down? It's that harrowing of hell. It's that cleansing of all those things. So what I think of, I'm glad you just said this, and I don't want to lose this thought, that Christ is the complete being, the totally integrated being. So depth psychology talks about individuation. It talks, when you can understand what is in shadow in your life, you allow it up, whether that's in analyzing your dreams, or going to therapy, or just through sitting and being a bit more open and organized and not afraid of what's coming up. Then you are able to integrate it back into the personality. You love it. I mean, Ho'oponopono can be really helpful. You to say, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And that child that's in the unconscious that wants to be loved is loved again. There's wholeness. And when Jesus said,
Integration, that's another whole like
yeah,
wormhole, because I'll just, from my own experience, and I don't know how much it lines up to exactly with Carl Jung's like definitions of it, but the way I talk about shadow work, and I discussed this with another guy named Artem. We interviewed him. Do you know what his last name is? His name is Artem Boitsov. And he kind of corroborated what I was saying. I said, when I was doing some shadow work, it was like an exorcism, meaning I would, for hours at a time, I was in solitude, in darkness, and doing, I guess, what you could call depth psychology. I was spelunking into my own psychology, into the caves. And the results were unsettling. They would come off as very crazy, I think, to most people, because there was physical manifestations and like shaking and crying and rolling around and sweating and all this stuff. And it was like an exorcism. It was like letting my body react to all these things that had been pushed off, and entertaining and bringing to the surface things that I couldn't possibly be true about me. That's other bad perpetrator people that have this in their mind. And lo and behold, it was found within my mind, and it was all being exhumed, if that makes sense. And in the exhuming process, I don't know. I don't really feel like it was a cathartic like release. Maybe this is what integration was. It was just a recognition. It was like, I gotta own it. I gotta own it, even if some of this stuff was exposed to me. You know what I mean? Like if somebody says something horrific to you, it's in your mind now. You know what I mean? So what do you think if somebody came up to Jesus and was like, said something reprehensible or disgusting, that he's like, no, I didn't hear what you said. I don't know what that is. He was a fully conscious being. He would have seen that thing and not pushed it aside. And I think in the pushing aside, the demons grow teeth, you know what I mean? And they, like you said, all of a sudden you're doing something, you don't even understand why you're doing this horrible thing. It's coming out, you know? But if you see it for what it is, sorry, I'll leave it at that.
You can take Jesus' word at so many levels. What came up as you were talking is love your enemies, pray for those that persecute you. Well, who are the enemies?
They know not what they do.
Unconscious, the stuff that you've pushed down into the unconscious. So love it. And those things that persecute you, like if you're having dreams and nightmares, these are the demons. Well, these are the things that are persecuting you. Pray for those that it's diffused in that, it's cleaned, and then it's integrated. That like there's no resistance then from it. So when it gets very dramatic, the drama is in the realm of the duality, and so that's the only arena in which it can happen. So you take it into the non-dual, and there's nothing to resist. There is only love. There is only love. And to come back to this about being whole, when Jesus said, you must be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, he was always trying to just get us back to this non-duality. So source, as your Father in heaven is perfect. The word he uses in the Greek is teleos. And that word is a word that means completion or wholeness. It doesn't mean perfect. So we tend to think, we just got to do better at trying to be good. No, he's saying you need to be integrated. You need to be whole.
Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect.
Is whole, just unified. So the way I understand it, and Paul said something about this, was Christ is the first Adam and the last Adam. So the first Adam was in this state is the human being. It's just the template of the human being. There's only one human being, okay? And so these are just stories. I mean, I know that Christians take them very literally, but we don't have to take them literally, because mythology, all the Bible is mythology. And people think that you're meaning, myth, it's not true. That's a real misunderstanding. What myth is it's more true than if it were just a historical event, because it's a pattern that repeats in every human being and will continue to for all humanity. So it's really important that we understand that myth, we make notice of it. So in the myth, we have Adam and Eve in the garden, and then we have this sin entry, the duality enters, okay, the sense of separation because they cast themselves out. So that was the beginning, this dualistic experience. And then what Christ does is kind of takes the duality, brings it back to wholeness. So you have Christ as the first Adam and the last Adam. So it's a completion. That's the whole story of redemption. Starts off whole, gets splintered out into this experience of duality and all the drama that it gives us and all the opportunities for growth, and then takes us back to wholeness.
That's so brilliant what you said about myth. It's more true than a historical account. And you know what's unbelievable about you saying that is, I was talking to my spouse this morning about Pocahontas, And we started looking up, because when I was growing up, it was like Pocahontas was magical. She could, I don't know if you know who Pocahontas is. They made a Disney movie about her.
Yes.
And it was like she had a magical power to understand English without having to learn it. And we started looking into it, and it turned out to really seem like that was a big embellishment. And then they were like, you know what's interesting is if this was a Christian story, it would have been like, and God gave Pocahontas the Yahweh gave Pocahontas the ability to understand English. And I'm going, so what's going on there that we have historically this capacity to confabulate? And who knows, maybe a lot of Jesus' stories were like exaggerated, confabulated, whatever. It's like, but the point is, look where we collectively went with it. That is more important than the raw data, even, because maybe we're putting too high of a premium even on raw data in some sense when it comes to like what's shaping our reality here. But I'm saying the tendency to form these things into like stories that traverse eons, mythological stories, and why would we have turned it into this? Why was this essential to us, like learning how to not be barbarians anymore, not learning how to like get away from torture and brutality and more to collaboration and the project love. Let's create love, for Pete's sake. We all started off as snakes just eating tubes, and then all the way to this, complex being that's like trying to figure out what's good. I think that it's interesting that you said that. It's interesting what you said about mythology being in some way truer, and maybe that's even what old Jordan Peterson's getting at when he keeps being questioned. Are you a Christian or not? And he's like, I'm not going to answer that. The point is that the Bible's more true than truth. And which is frustrating.
He was influenced a lot by Jung as well, Carl Jung. He talked a lot about Carl Jung and the power of story.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not a huge Jordan Peterson fan or something, but
no, same.
He might have a point.
Yeah. Which brings me to when you talked about Yahweh, my last book to show, which is C.G. Jung answer to Job. So in Job, in the Old Testament, people who don't know, it's this story, this mythological story where Yahweh or Satan comes along and says to Yahweh, I see that he's really righteous, this person here, and I want to kind of play with him, and Yahweh gives permission. I mean, Yahweh, you see, the thing, Yahweh is this narcissistic sort of sociopath in the Old Testament. So much in the Old Testament that confusing to people. If you were a literal Christian and you were saying, I'm going to read my Bible to learn about God, and then you go and Yahweh saying, go into the land of the Amalekites, whatever, smite them, everyone, don't leave a woman or rape the women, don't leave a child alive, burn horrible. All the houses. So how and really what it is in mythology you have ideas of Yahweh was a tribal god, and then it's this progressive revelation whereby in the story of Job, and he suffers terribly because Yahweh's let him and just stood back and said, okay, you can do, like some little mouse that the cats are sort of playing with and toying with, and could you look on at that and allow that to happen? And Job says famously, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. And the Christians might think, oh, good, you see, we just got to, even though God sends terrible things, we've still got to be obedient. No. What you've got there is you've got a human being becoming more moral, superior, surpassing the morality of the God. All right, and that's a problem in mythology, you see? So the only thing that can happen of necessity is that God then has to become a human being. This is all about people's understanding of what the divine is. It's not about anything ontological, about what reality is. It's always stories about remember, it's people that wrote the Bible. It's actually not people, it's men that wrote the Bible.
It's like the evolution of God. It's like you're seeing the evolution of God through, which is more
God's the same today, tomorrow. But it's like, but that might be true. But he sure seems to change a lot. If he is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, maybe he changes. And that's what's the same about him, is his tendency to change,
which was really telling us more about who we are.
People. We're projecting this Yahweh in the sky, this Zeus, and you're quite right. It's evolution. It's called progressive revelation, and then you get the person, and then if you want to know what God looks like, look at Jesus, and then we have that template, like I say to you, that is just about this whole human being, about someone who's perfectly integrated. And and
it's
all good
painful
stuff.
listening. It's painful listening to like a traditional fundamentalist try to
Defend something like
defend
that.
both like the old version of God versus kind of like the
Yeah.
new progressive revelation.
You know what? If we're going to be integrative here, then it's still something to glean from that. There's still something to glean. It's like if you look out into nature, it's like, oh, behold, a volcano violently erupting into the sky. That neutron star just like explode. Like there's still like animals eating each other in violence and carnage. It's still here. You know what I mean? Like, let's not be non-integrative here. But I think the thing is this, okay? Earlier we alluded to this a little bit. And it's like, let's say you take to heart that thing of let not me live, but Christ live through me. And you realize something that could be of use here. It's like, you know what? I've been acting a fool, and maybe I'm triggering the most petty, lowest aspects of the people around me. Like some people are taking advantage of me. Some people are, they're reprehensible characters too, but they kind of like my company because I'm screwed up too. I'm going to clean myself up, and this isn't even going to be a problem for me when the crabs in the bucket situation starts happening and people start trying to claw me back into the old. What's happened to the old you? This is disturbing. I can take it. I can take the rejection if it needs to be, because I have no identification with this. So where that becomes appealing, maybe even to the most asleep, unconscious person, is pain takes on a new meaning. Pain isn't to you when you're embodied by Christ as it is when you are embodied by the ego, which is like a coward and fearful and covetous and a tyrant and so many different things. If Christ's living through you and that's usurped that egoic, monkey at the control lever machine, then even pain is like, pain's not what the problem it once was. Is this resonating?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that struck me when you said that is that it isn't about the person going. It's not like I don't want to. The personality is still the unique diversity of each person. It's just got the upgrade to the Christ. So it becomes almost like Justin Christ, James Christ, Jill Christ, and Jesus Christ. It's not that we just end up being like Jesus of Nazareth. You know what I mean? It's not the same. It's understanding that this Christ is the human being, and it's just having this multiplicity of experiences, and it's the differences between us that make it exciting and interesting. But you're doing it, you're living it with awareness. I'm either running the template of Adam, who was in separation and duality, or I'm running the template of Christ. And which program am I running?
Well, Jill, we could talk for a long time here.
We could.
I want to say
queuing up to say more.
I want to say thank you so much for spending this time with us, coming on the show and sharing some of your insights. I like at the end kind of to give our guests an opportunity, kind of like if they want, share kind of maybe their overarching message, maybe of your channel. If you have some last words you want to say, and then after that, maybe let our audience know where they can find you, what you got going on, and any of that good stuff.
Yeah, I think I'd want to say to anybody watching this who may have had some background in Christianity and for whatever reason has been hurt, been just deconstructed, but something of when we've been talking has resonated, and this wanting to go back to the original Jesus. Remember, you just always go back behind the story, get back to that original person, his wisdom teaching, and I think his non-dual teaching. Give him a second chance. Remember, this is the thing to say. It wasn't Jesus that hurt you. This might speak to someone. Jesus didn't hurt you. People hurt you. Okay? So that might land for someone. And then just look at Rupert Spira, look at the Christian mystics, and just go your own journey. You can follow my channel because I'm just exploring and sharing things that I'm insight that I'm having, I'm sharing, and it's just lovely when people say that makes so much sense. We're on this journey together. It is quite new, in many ways it's new territory, but it's valid. It's exciting. And you can follow my channel, Non-Dual Christian. You can find my website, jillbrennan.com. and you can book a session with me if you want to talk about faith shift, because I do like to perhaps help support people who feel very isolated and just want to know someone understands, or they've got questions, and they faith shift sort of mentoring or reconnective healing, for a session of reconnective healing. So you can find all that at my website.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jill. This was a pleasure.
Awesome.